I remember looking in the mirror and seeing myself as I was about to place an order at Taco Bell. And I just looked at my face and said, you got to stop eating this way. You've got to do something. But once your body is realizing you have the nutrients that are necessary, your brain says, okay, you're good. You don't need to keep eating now. And it lets your body know to turn off those hunger signals. I found myself being able to go late in the day without even having thought about food. I was addicted. I was addicted to those things, and they were what was controlling me.
Be sure to check out Ferrigno Freedom Facebook group. This group is private so that you don't have to worry about all your personal information being shared with all of your friends. We're just here to encourage each other and keep each other on track.
Good afternoon. So we've got Dante with us. Dante, how you doing, man?
Great. How are you doing, Dr. Baker? Nice to talk to you again. It's been a while.
Yeah, exactly. I'm doing pretty good. Honestly, I'm a little jet lagged from getting back from Europe a couple of days ago. I'm still not quite fully onto that normal schedule, but that's okay. We'll get there. You're like in Florida or something like that, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right?
Yes, I am.
Oh, nice. And just looking at your last name, Ferrigno, you're not related to Lou Ferrigno, are you, by any chance?
All my life, I thought I was because my Aunt Rose said I was, and she was the keeper of the family tree. However, when I met Lou, he said, no, you're not related to me. But from what I hear, he says that to everybody whose last name is Ferrigno, and he gets a little grumpy about it, but I don't let it be a thing.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how common that name is. Maybe it's fairly common. Is that like Italian, or what is it? What is it?
Yes. Yeah, it's actually pronounced Ferrigno in Italy, which I figured out for sure when I finally went there. And there were a number of people with the same last name in the phone book because I was trying to track down anybody who might have known some old family members, but none of them were familiar with my grandfather, who came over on a boat when he was 5 years old back in 1905, I think it was. I guess it's fairly common.
Okay. Welcome. Glad to have you here. I guess we'll just get started with your background, and I guess we'll just get into that.
My background, I'm just a regular guy is the best way I can put it. As far as when it comes to diet and body and things like that, when I was very young, I had to struggle with my weight. I remember being in second grade and having to wear the trash bag over my body, put a hole for my head and holes for my arms. And then they'd run me around the track trying to get me to lose weight, even as early as second grade. And my mother was always fairly health conscious, which I thought she's leading me down the right path, hopefully. And she used to be into Cambridge products and Amway products, and she was always into whatever the next fad thing was. And she had me eating cereal and all the things that they were telling us to do back in the 80s with the food pyramid and stuff like that. And of course, this was the 70s when I was in second grade, I think. Yeah. And I don't know, I just grew up eating the standard American diet that was popular in the 80s. We did a lot of low fat avoidance, avoiding fat. And I don't want to jump too far ahead, but up until my senior year of high school, I was always struggling with my weight. And I would do everything I could to try to get in shape because I didn't want to be the heavy guy. And especially back in the 70s and 80s, people were a lot more harsh to other kids, especially back then. So it was a tough time. But once I hit my senior year, I started to get a little trimmer as I sprang up. And I was a year early in high school, so I was technically the age of everybody that was a junior that year. And I got my stride then, and then I joined the wrestling team. I had always been sedentary prior to that. I did do ROTC my first 3 years of school, but we didn't do a whole lot of heavy activity, just some standard calisthenics and things occasionally. And I thought that was enough, plus trying to eat right. I remember watching Mr. T and him telling us to drink our milk and all the different things that I was trying to follow these guys that I idolized. Sylvester Stallone and Arnold Schwarzenegger were my heroes back then. And I wanted to have a body like that. I wanted to have abs like Sylvester Stallone and never could seem to get there. But I started off on the high school wrestling team at 210 pounds. I was 6'1", and I wanted to get down to 189 because when you're wrestling anything above 189, it's heavyweight, and that maxes out at 275. So it was always hard when I was dealing with these guys that were monsters compared to me. So I said, I got to get down to 189. So I started eating a lot of fruit. And I started eating a lot of things that I thought were going to make me healthier. And though I did make it down to 189, I have to probably put it on to jump and rope 30 minutes to 45 minutes every day until I had muscles in my legs I didn't even know existed. So that probably was what helped me get there, was all the extra exercise. But after that, very shortly after, I started gaining a little weight, and I was trying to work on my body, but it just wasn't working out. And then I settled into normal life. I got married young. I had children young, and I was in a sales job and eventually in management. So it was a lot of sedentary work, not a whole lot of activity, not a whole lot of outside. And then you settle into the foods that are available when you're working 12 hours a day, which is often going to be fast food or whatever they deliver. And a lot of times, like, the manager would send us some pizza or something like that on a busy day on sales. And that lifestyle was, I wouldn't say working for me, but that was the standard way of eating. That was just how we tried to get by. And I started putting on a little more weight. I'd hit the 230s, the 240s. And I can't even remember when it started to get out of control. But I think it was about 1999 when I realized I had hit 302 pounds. And I was eating a lot of Mexican food too, because I lived in South Texas at the time. And those come with a lot of things that you don't need to have: flour tortillas, corn tortillas, beans, rice, drinking horchatas, which are basically a rice drink that's just full of sugar. And I was just telling the story earlier today because I was talking to Reno over at 5 Minute Body. But so I hate to repeat myself, but I want to be able to let you know what I went through. I remember looking in the mirror and seeing myself as I was about to place an order at Taco Bell. And I just looked at my face and said, you got to stop eating this way. You've got to do something. And this was December of 2006. And I said, you got to make a change. And I talked to somebody who had lost a lot of weight. My district manager at the store I was working for, he kept coming into the office about every 6 weeks, and he just kept getting smaller and smaller. And I said, man, what are you doing? What is you've lost? You look great. And he told me about the Atkins Diet Revolution book. This is before all the Atkins products were all over the shelves. This was just about using knowledge and eating the right way. And basically, it's a high protein diet. Now, of course, he allows for a lot of other things like greens and salad dressing and mayonnaise and a lot of things that I don't eat on Lion Diet, but a lot of things that were allowed on a regular carnivore diet, pork and chicken and fish and all that stuff was great. So I started that December 2nd, I believe is when I started that. And then I went on until May 2nd, and I had lost 88 pounds and gone down from a size 42 waist to a size 32. So I learned that eating a lot of protein would be great. But what I didn't know was that meat was the superfood, because Dr. Atkins talked about the necessity of having garden vegetables in your food. He always talked about not having the red and the bright colored vegetables. He would talk about eating greens and things like that. So I always ate spinach. Raw spinach was a big thing for me. And I thought that was where I was getting all my nutrients from. And now I know it was the meat that was really giving me the nutrients. But back then I would pound vitamins like crazy. And if it wasn't for the vitamins, I skipped a few days of not having any vitamins one time. And that whole day, after about 4 days, the fourth day of not having any vitamins, I felt like I was going to die. I felt like I just had no energy. I couldn't get out of bed. I didn't want to go to work. And I thought, wow, so I guess this meat doesn't have anything that's good for you. But it wasn't about that. Later on, I found out the key was electrolytes, at least for me, because after Atkins diet, I started putting the weight back on slowly, and I actually kept it off pretty good. I got down to 214 when I was on Atkins, but then I started creeping back up to that 230 range, probably within the 2007 year. So it was in the same year that I'd lost all the weight, and that stayed there for a good couple of years. But then it started creeping back in, and it started getting easier to go back to a regular way of eating. I was still trying to be low carb, but I was allowing for things that I shouldn't be allowing because I felt I like my body. I'm okay. Everything's fine. I can partake in some of this stuff. But for whatever reason, I think I'm more sensitive to it because I started putting the weight on, and I was probably in the 250s when I got married again. And you get happy with somebody and she's making all the great food, and started putting more weight back on. And I think the last time I checked the scale where I was at a high weight with her, I was back up to 289 pounds because I didn't make a lifestyle change. That's ultimately the big difference, is that I just didn't say this is going to be the way it is. And around that time, I started having a lot of pressure in my life. because I was working as a retirement home administrator up in Georgia. And there is a lot of top-down control from regulators. And I'm a big freedom guy, so I have a hard time with some of the stuff they require of us, because I want to tell them, look, this is a private company. This is my business. You don't need to be telling me how to do everything. And that's what they want to do. And that was really getting under my skin and wrenching my guts, because I also saw a lot of times the things they were requiring us to do were ultimately unhealthy for the residents in the long run. But because they fit into a certain norm, they fit into a certain guideline that the medical community required of us, and these nurses and things that put these programs together for these regulators would do, no salt diets for these people. They wouldn't allow us to experiment with things, even coconut oil. They would tell us what type of oils we could use. And the worst thing was looking at the food that they would allow us to feed them and realizing it's just loaded with carbohydrates. And then they wonder why they're fighting with diabetes, and I can't do anything to help them. So that was weighing on me. The business was struggling financially because it was a rural community and it was a family-owned business. And I have felt a lot of responsibility to keep this going. Plus, I had my own family to provide for. And then 2020 hit. Oh, boy, you want to talk about stress going through the roof, trying to take care of all of these elderly folks in the middle of the pandemic. I started to have, I don't remember if it was in 2020, but I think it was earlier, that I started having these problems with my gut where it just hurt right above my belly button all the time. And when I would wake up in the morning, it was worse than ever. It would feel like I just had a black hole there that was sucking all the life out of me and making me feel terrible. I couldn't go to the bathroom. I had constipation all the time. I would get up and sit in my bathtub for an hour or more so that I could get things moving and put Epsom salts in there. And I couldn't sleep at night. I couldn't get to bed. I would sit there and look at the back of my eyelids all the time and trying to get some sleep, watching the hours click away. Sometimes the sun's coming up and I still haven't gotten to sleep, but I got to be at work first thing in the morning. Thankfully, being in charge, I had a little bit of flexibility with when I could come in. I held myself to an accountability. I wanted to be there early. I wanted to be there for the people that are going to be starting in the morning. And if somebody's coming by to look at the home, but I was getting into work at 10, 11 o'clock, struggling with all this stuff. And I think the stress combined with the bad food, and I know we were getting a lot of seed oils because not only did our cook use seed oils to cook everything with, but I was eating a lot of fast food. Even though I would try to low carb it, I was still eating the stuff that they make at Hardee's or somewhere like that, and getting the lettuce and the tomato and the pickles and all the other stuff. And I think the combination of that, the lifetime of seed oils, all the damage I had done doing low carb, which includes getting my gallbladder taken out back in 2002, I truly attest that my gallbladder loss came from all the low fat dieting that I was doing in the 80s and 90s, because all that bile just sits in there with nothing to do and hardens up. And then I wound up losing my gallbladder. So all of these things got together and the doctors had no answers. I had a colonoscopy. I'd had endoscopy. I'd gotten another colonoscopy, talking to a gastroenteritis, talking to my primary care doctor. I wound up in the emergency room once. And then the next time I woke up in the hospital, but they had already checked me into a room. I had passed out from the pain that I was having. And I'll never forget, after a nighttime of screaming and being in pain, the doctor came in the morning, and I'd been begging for somebody to do something to take this pain away. And the guy comes in and he just says, "Mr. Ferrigno, what do you want us to do for you?" And I looked at him and I thought, what do you mean? What do I want you to do for me? I'm in pain. I have a problem and I don't know what it is. And I'm here to get your help. I get the feeling he thought I was just looking for pain meds. And though I did have an issue with things like drinking and doing other things that would relieve some of the stress issues, like that wasn't what my goal was. I wanted to get this problem to go away, and nobody had any answers. And I know I'm probably giving you a lot more than you asked for out of this first question, so I hope you don't mind me hogging all the conversation here. But I had about 2 months before I started Lion Diet, maybe 3 months, I started watching. I had heard about this guy that I kept hearing his name mentioned around named Jordan Peterson. And I said, all right, who is this guy, Jordan Peterson, I keep hearing about? And I started watching some of his stuff, and I was instantly hooked on his approach to things, his taking responsibility for yourself, taking care of yourself as if you were taking care of somebody else. And my career at that time was about being a caregiver for the past 10 years. So I had to really look at that and say, I'm not taking care of myself. I'm trying to take care of everybody else, but I'm not taking care of myself. And I was listening to some of the techniques he was talking about psychologically, how you can motivate yourself to just not be afraid to get started on what you need to do to attack something, whether it's bills or just cleaning up your room like he talks about. But then one day I heard him talking to Joe Rogan, and this caught me out of the blue. It was just like a shock when I heard Joe ask him, so tell me about how that all beef diet you're doing is going. And I thought, what? You can't eat only beef. Even though I knew about the Atkins diet, his book was very adamant that you needed to have these other things. And I didn't think there was enough stuff in beef to give you the nutrients you needed. So I thought, not only is this not going to give you energy, but it's the lack of vegetables is going to make it hard to go to the bathroom, and all this protein is going to be bad for my kidneys. And I thought, what is going on? But I had a lot of faith in what he was saying because I had heard him tell me a lot of things that had helped me out along the way. So when I heard the rest of his story about how he got started doing this and about all the things that it had cured for him and for his daughter, which I know you're familiar with both of them, it just got to be ultimately, this was the only answer that I have left, because I've got $20,000 in doctor bills now. I have no solutions from doctors. I'm going to give this a try. I was so desperate and hitting points of depression at that point that I was willing to try anything. And there were times when the depression left me in some really dark places. So this was my last straw. This was my last shot at doing something to solve this problem for me. And even though I was heavier, I was probably around 280 pounds around the time I started. I didn't actually weigh myself because I wasn't interested in talking about weight. I just wanted to cure this gut problem that I had and get these, even the emotional things, because he talked about how he and his daughter both, as a result of doing the lion diet, which I'm sure, but maybe somebody watching doesn't know, lion diet is ruminant meat, water, and salt, plain and simple. So it's a carnivore diet that excludes a lot of the animals that are not ruminating. And the health benefits that he talked about were what convinced me to start. And I had already been doing something on YouTube with gaming. It just goes to show, even when I got off of work, I'm sitting around playing games and broadcasting stuff on YouTube. So I had a very sedentary life, and I never had the energy to get up and exercise. But I started recording my progress because I thought, the guys I share this stuff with, they're probably a little heavier from sitting around playing games all the time. Maybe they'll see that I'm going to lose weight. I knew I was going to lose weight based on my experience on the Atkins diet. And I was buying into what Jordan Peterson was saying. And I also heard Mikhaila Peterson talk about the thing that was so important for her was getting enough salt, because electrolytes, when I heard her talk about electrolytes, I realized that's what I was missing. It wasn't pounding vitamins, because I had started to learn that meat is where all the nutrients are, but I didn't know what it was that the energy issue was. And then I realized it was electrolytes, and I said, I can do this. I can do this for 6 weeks and see if it does any good for me. And October 11th will be 1,000 days that I've been eating only lion diet. Now, I've done some experimentation along the way, but for the most part, I'm still strictly lion diet. I tried to add eggs and cheese and butter back, but I had to stay away from the dairy. And the healing was almost instantaneous as far as feeling better. But before I go into what happened after that, I want to make sure I'm not jumping too far ahead of any questions that anybody might have about where we've gotten to so far, or any questions you might have.
No, I think you're doing great, and it's nice because then I don't got to talk as much. So keep rolling into your story. Yeah, so it's always wonderful to hear these types of stories, because I hear them all the time, and it never fails to impress me.
I'm not hearing anything, Dr. Baker.
Oh, that's right. I muted myself. Yeah, I muted myself. Sorry about that. I was going to say that, no, it's not a problem. You just keep talking away. It takes the pressure off of me from having to talk. So if you want to just continue, you've got this 1,000+ days of red meat, salt, and water, basically, and been doing well. So I guess, yeah, just pick it up and keep going.
Yeah, I'm actually around 960 right now. So on October 11th, I'll hit 1,000 days. But when I started off, one of the first things I did was I wanted to make sure I had plenty of meat ready, because I remembered from back when I did Atkins diet, one of the things that I did as a hack to always have meat is I worked across the street from a steakhouse that had a buffet. And after 4 o'clock in the afternoon, you could go in and get anything you want on the buffet. And I think it was $4.50 or $5 a pound. And they would have sirloin steaks on the buffet. So I just go in there and load up a whole box of sirloin steaks, and that would help me get through. I made a lot of hamburger, did a lot of tuna fish and things like that back then. So I knew that the important thing was, if I get hungry, I got to have something I can eat ready. And that's where the tuna fish would come in, or having the box of steaks around. Because if you get hungry, or if you get those cravings, and there is a difference, and at the time, I didn't really understand the difference between hunger and cravings, but you start to learn to listen to your body as you get more in control of your health. At least I have, and I'm sure it works out good for everybody. Cravings are when you want one specific thing. Hunger is when you'll eat anything, and you can tell the difference when you're dying for some ice cream or some pizza. If that's what you're focused on, you're not really hungry. You're just craving something, and cravings can cause you to derail yourself. So I wanted to make sure that I didn't foul up. Those first 6 weeks, I did as close to pure lion diet as I possibly could. I can't remember specifically what I might have cheated on. I was still vaping at the time. I was still smoking occasionally at the time. I was still drinking beer occasionally, but not very often. And early on, I wasn't doing it at all. But I got serious about making sure I had the food ready. So as long as it was there and I could heat it up, it was good. Then I discovered the air fryer. I was able to get a steak done in 13 to 14 minutes to my satisfaction. And back then, I didn't have as much of appreciation for how to make them. I just knew that they were coming out juicy and delicious, and that's all I needed, something I could get done quick and easy. And that was what allowed me to overcome any hurdles. And I realized very quickly that you get satiated eating meat a lot faster than you would, say, eating vegetables and things like that, because I didn't know then. But once your body is realizing you have the nutrients that are necessary, your brain says, okay, you're good. You don't need to keep eating now. And it lets your body know to turn off those hunger signals. I found myself being able to go late in the day without even having thought about food. And the best part was the sleep change was almost immediate. Within a month, I went from not being able to get to sleep at night after night, not being able to get out of bed in the morning, even when I would set the alarm and hit the snooze 1,000 times, to going to bed at 11, 12 o'clock, and I'm waking up at 4:30 in the morning, just ready to jump on the day. And I thought, this is amazing. My sleep is already better. My gut pain had started to go away. I was still having occasional issues, but it's so rare I can't even recall anything that was close to what it was like before that. Of course, I started having keto flu, or having the digestive issues that come with switching to an all-meat diet, which I understand there's a lot of theories as to what causes that. But just being able to go at all was a benefit to me, because I was not having that problem anymore. The constipation had gone away, and I started feeling better, feeling stronger, feeling happier. My attitude changed almost immediately. And my wife started to notice it, because all that pressure I'd been going through, and the stress and the anxiety and the depression coming in, was having a big effect on my relationship with my wife at the time of 9 or 10 years. And I didn't want to lose my wife because of attitude issues. So I was very happy to see the emotional change came quickly as well. So I started seeing the effects immediately. So once I got to that 6-week point, I didn't even question whether I wanted to keep going. This was the way, and I wanted to stay on this path. I just kept on going. Eventually, I started to think about the other things that I'm putting into my body and that I'm putting into my mind. If I'm being a food Nazi about everything that I'm eating, it became real easy to start saying, why am I sucking on this vape pen? Why am I smoking this thing? Why am I drinking this occasional bourbon still, or drinking some beer occasionally? None of that stuff's good for me. So why don't I just cut those out as well? And it took some time. There were battles back and forth dealing with these vices. You can't just seem to quit all of these things at once because it's hard to break a bad habit, and it's even harder to start a good habit. So within about a year, maybe a little over a year, I had finally quit all of those vices, which were important also because of the cost of eating a diet like this. When you're doing an all meat diet, a lot of people talk about the cost. It is a little more expensive. But when you started to figure in the fact that I was able to kick some of these bad habits, I stopped buying a 1.7 liter bottle of bourbon every week. I stopped buying beer. I stopped buying chips and sodas when I would stop by the gas station just to fill up. All of that stuff starts to add up. And then I didn't need to see my doctor as much anymore. That was a big one. I got rid of all my medicines within the first couple of months. I was on a high blood pressure medicine. I was on medicines for allergies. And there were a few other medicines I can't think of right now. And you know what? I like that. I don't want to have to even think back on those times. But if I'd have written them down, it would be a little more helpful. But I was taking about 6 different medicines at the time. One of them was omeprazole, and it was the 40 milligrams. So it was the prescription strength. And they thought that might help with some of the stomach problems. But I was telling them it's not my stomach, it's my gut. But I wound up getting off all of that. The one thing that I wound up staying on for about a year, I want to say it was right at 1 year after starting Lion Diet, is that I had started about 3.5 years before I started eating Lion Diet. I had started taking testosterone injections because I had gone to my doctor and he checked my numbers and I was in the high 300s, which is not technically low for my age, but it's low. And I think that the chart, to be honest with you, is a little bit skewed because from what I understand, testosterone numbers that were normal were close to 1,000, and now they say normal is around 600-700. So I think that's just been one more of those things that has been adjusted over time as our society has gotten sicker and sicker. They're seeing things that are normal that are not really normal for us. But so I had the low testosterone, and I also had some dysfunction that was affecting bedroom performance. So the doctor put me on what he called a low dose of testosterone. It was a 0.5 cc every week. And from what I've been able to research since then, that is about as low as you can really go as far as a recommendation. And I started to see like the benefits of having a little more strength. And I like that. And I was, able to perform better again. But I also noticed that I think that was causing some of my anxiety as well, because I don't know if you call it roid rage, because it wasn't a whole lot that I was taking, but increasing my numbers probably had some effects on that. But I had grown to be used to that as being a part of my daily life. And I thought it even helped with my attitude sometimes, because my wife would say, if you skip a week of that, next thing I know, you're just off the deep end mentally, and I can't be near you. So I had a hard time quitting that. And then also I told the doctor after it was like 30 or 60 days into eating this diet that I went and saw him, and he took me off of everything because he said, your blood pressure is normal. You haven't been taking your meds for 30 days already. You're not having the stomach problems. You're not having any of the other issues that we prescribed these other things to for you. So I was glad that he was on board with seeing that a carnivore way of eating wasn't hurting me. He was seeing the results and making the adjustments and saying, well, you don't need these things. And then I asked him about the testosterone, and he said, that's a little different. If you quit that, it's probably not going to go back to even where it was. It's probably going to drop down a bunch lower. And I guess that's what his experience had been, because they say, or what he was saying was, if you quit the testosterone and your body is not used to making it anymore, it's not going to be there when you need it. So I did continue with that for a while. And I didn't really understand this whole testosterone thing at all in the beginning. I was just following my doctor's advice, and it was making things better as far as the problem I spoke to him about. So I was happy. But then I started to research it a little more, because I hated having to still go see the doctor for this stupid injections. And then we made a move. My family, I brought my wife and my boys and I down here to Florida. We wanted to get away to the free state. I love it here. But getting to see a doctor is one heck of a chore when you don't have insurance. I was trying to do my own business at the time, so it was very difficult to get insurance. And even talking to a doctor when you don't have insurance, it's almost like it's a car dealer talking to somebody with bad credit. They don't want to have a conversation with you about even getting started on working with them if you didn't have insurance. So I was having a real hard time getting something set up. I didn't want to spend a whole lot of money on something when I was really not needing anything but somebody to refill my testosterone injection. And I put it off until finally my prescription ran out. And I said, you know what? I'm just going to let it run out. I'm not even going to worry about it. I'm going to stick with this. And I bet you being on this way of eating is going to help me. Thinking to myself, a few months later, I got my blood work done and my numbers were slightly higher. They were still in the 300s or maybe low 400s when I went and got that blood work done. But the fact that they didn't go into the toilet like my doctor said they were going to do was encouraging to me, because I said, if that's different, then maybe if I press on and I keep doing the exercise, which I started exercising, I started just walking a few miles every day. Actually, I started with just really when I started exercising, I was just doing 10 push-ups in the morning, 10 in the afternoon, 10 in the evening, because I felt like I've got energy now. I'm going to start trying to do this. And then that pushed up to be a little more and a little more. And then I bowled along too fast and ran myself out. And then I got back started doing walking. And that started with a 1 mile walk. Then it was a 2 mile walk. Before long, I was up to a 7 mile walk. And then the amount of time it was taking was too much. So I got it down to sweet spot. I could get in and out in an hour. And I was getting that exercise that I wasn't getting before. I started putting on a little bit of weight as far as muscle weight. And I'd also done a little more research on testosterone, like I mentioned. And from what I had been learning is that if you're exercising, if you're using your muscles, your body is going to have a testosterone boost from that. So I thought that combined with all the healing I'm seeing from doing this lion diet way of eating, let's see if I can't. And about 6 months later, maybe 7 months later, I went back and I finally got a regular doctor. I'd gotten a doctor the last time and I went to see her again. And the next time I went back, I think my numbers were like 590 something. Now, I know I've heard a lot of people tell me since then that it's more important to look at free testosterone. But at that point, all I had been told by my doctors was that testosterone number. And I knew it was low before, that it didn't go lower after I quit taking the testosterone. And now it had gotten higher without taking testosterone, eating an only lion diet way of eating and only doing the exercise. And that's when I started to realize this is freedom. When I left the doctor's appointment that day and I didn't have to make a follow-up appointment because I was on 0 medicines now, I thought, wow, I was already settling into this mentality that I'm just like my residents at the retirement home were. I've got to go see my doctor every 3 months or I'm not going to get my medicines refilled. And from taking people to their doctor's appointments like I used to do a lot of times, it felt like it was just a swinging door for them to go in and out. The doctor would ask some questions. The resident would answer with general boilerplate responses like, how are you doing? Fine. I know for a fact she's not fine, but she needs to be talking to the doctor about what her problems are. And even when they mention that I'm having this problem or that problem, a lot of times it seems like the doctor's, okay, don't worry about it. Here, just take this new med or stay on your old meds. And they're just billing Medicare for more and more. And you get into that cycle of being dependent on getting those medicines refilled. And when I left that appointment and I didn't have to go back to get anything refilled, it hit me. This is the freedom that I've been talking about. My name of my channel on YouTube is Ferrigno Freedom. And at the time, I didn't know what I was going to name it. I just knew I was a freedom lover and I was proud of my last name. And it might be good since I'm doing a health related thing that I could use some of that recognition that Ferrigno was well known for being a healthy guy. So I'll just use my name and stick with what I love. But it turned out to be, I found my freedom through Lion Diet, freedom from vices, freedom from spending money on all these different things that were just holding me back and chaining me down. Ultimately, I thought they were supposed to be helping me cope with problems, but they were actually exacerbating my problems, whether it was the food addiction, the drinking addiction, the drug addiction. And I never back then would have said I was addicted to these things. It's only now that I've been able to get them all out of my life that I look back and say, I was addicted. I was addicted to those things, and they were what was controlling me. Now I'm in control of my life. Now I'm the one who makes the decisions. I don't have to ask a doctor for permission about what I can go buy if I want to go buy anything at all. I don't have to spend money on medicines that make me have all these weird side effects or feel sleepy or cause headaches, or who knows. When you listen to a lot of these pharmaceutical commercials, the part at the end with all the problems is longer than the actual commercial itself. And that was just so freeing, leaving the doctor's office that day, knowing that I was no longer chained to this medical system that I've come to realize now, and I knew then from my experience as a retirement home manager, has just become a racket for selling medicine. That was the biggest blessing. Losing all the weight, getting my attitude straight, being able to save money by not wasting it on all these things that I thought I enjoyed. Now when I want to go enjoy myself, I go down to the spring and go swimming. I'll go hiking. I'll go kayaking. I remember early on in the diet, I went up Stone Mountain in Georgia. And my wife used to always want to go hiking somewhere. And I was like, no, I don't want to go hiking. When she talked about wanting to go up Stone Mountain that day, I said, yeah, let's do it. I'm excited. I want to be a part of this. This was within my 125 days that I planned for my first video that I made. And I was excited to get up to the top of that mountain. I remember racing her to the top and trying to get there to be first. And I did. It changed everything. And that's how I open all my videos now. I show a picture of me before and a picture of me at my best on this diet. And the visual difference is stunning enough to be able to say, Lion Diet changed everything. But there's so much more than just the physical appearance, because I never even started doing this for weight loss. I feel better. I'm able to control my emotions better. I'm a fairly emotional guy. I look at guys like you and I'm a little jealous because you got a toughness that I didn't have naturally. And I'm working on that. And thanks to people like Jordan Peterson, I've been able to dig up that courage that I needed to keep doing the things that I need to do, to keep moving in that right direction, to get up, to make the bed, to get started on the day, to not be afraid to attack those bills or attack whatever work is in front of me. And it's just life-changing. And I couldn't have done any of it if I didn't change my diet and get all of that poison out of my system, whether it was the seed oils, the sugars, the processed names, the things on the ingredients that you can't even pronounce, what they do to all the vegetables. See, I have this approach with vegetables is that biblically speaking, I'm a Christian. Biblically speaking, vegetables and meats are a part of the diet. We're allowed to eat certain things. And even the Lord said that all of this stuff is good to eat as long as you're saying grace over it. But what we've seen in the food industry, especially with the companies that make fruits and vegetables, is they're doing things that are causing the fruit to ripen while it's on the truck. They're spraying it with chemicals. They're doing crossbreeding to make the foods increase the sugar content, because that obviously makes you want it more. I used to love the Honeycrisp apples because they were the sweet ones. Nobody ate red apples anymore because everybody wanted the sweetest thing that was out there. And I didn't realize that these were Frankenstein fruits. And not to mention, they're not available year round when it's natural. But now we've got availability of all these fruits all throughout the year because of things like genetic manipulation, those crossbreedings I mentioned, and then we're spraying them with pesticides. We're making the vegetables more pest resistant, which essentially means the toxins that are in those vegetables are stronger now to keep the pest out. That's the same stuff that's going in you. And getting all of that out of my life was a tremendous boost. I mentioned getting my gallbladder out. One of the important things I think for me was also not eating the fiber. I had a bout with diverticulitis just before I started this way of eating, about a year before. And that was when I found out I got to be careful about seeds and things like that. But nobody ever said to get rid of the roughage. Once I got rid of the fiber, the pain went away. Whenever I tried to reincorporate any type of food that had plant fiber in it, I could feel it moving through my system. So I've done some damage to my intestines in my first 48 years of eating the wrong things, and also letting adversity become stress going outside. But Lion Diet has changed all of that. And I couldn't be more grateful to people like you, because I know you gave some advice to Mikhaila Peterson when she first started doing this, that she had talked to you about some of these things. And if it wasn't for her journey leading to Jordan's journey that led to my journey, and to think of all the people that are on my channel now who come and tell me that I've changed their lives, I love being a part of this community. I love seeing the multiplying effect of helping people get well. Because one of the things I always, when I thought about doing a YouTube channel, I used to think I would want to talk about politics and talk about how we can change things for the better. I was a history major when I was in college originally, so I wanted to try to educate people about certain things. But in my 30 years since starting college until this moment, basically, none of that talk ever changed anybody. It either people just heard it and said, I don't agree with that, and shut me up, or they already agreed with me and they were like, yeah, I'm thumbs up with you. And I thought, I don't really want to do the politics side because it doesn't seem to be effective. It doesn't change minds. But when I learned that lion diet and that carnivore way of eating, because I've had a number of people, because I don't tell people lion diet is it. You've got to do lion diet or you're not going to get healthy. Because I've seen so many people that have gotten healthy doing a standard carnivore diet that I encourage people, whatever diet you try to start with, if it's helping you make gains, stick with it. But pay close attention. You got to figure out where the problems are. And I used to tell folks, hey, if you want to go vegetarian, see what happens. Maybe it's going to work good for you, because some people tell me they do great on it. But a lot of times I look at those folks that are vegetarian or vegan and I see them gaining weight, especially the vegetarians tend to gain weight because they'll eat cakes and all kind of stuff like that. And then the vegans, a lot of times I'd see would look pasty and pale, and they just looked weak. Not to mention, you watch some of the things they would do, going to the supermarket and pouring out milk on the floor and pouring all the animal products out. You don't see carnivores going into a store and damaging somebody's stuff. So ultimately, when I realized that I could get people to get healthy, that I could encourage people, and I've always had a gift for communication, at least so I'm told, I thought I'm going to use this gift to help people be motivated to give something a try. Maybe you were in the same position I was in, and I've started interviewing people myself that are just regular Joes like I was when I started this, that have seen results doing things that are not exactly the same as me. So I always tell them, hey, if carnivore way of eating works for you, if eating eggs and eating cheese and eating butter and all of that works for you, stick with it. If you don't know if it works for you, if you want to start with carnivore and you're not feeling those results, maybe you should try lion diet. Maybe you should restrict it down to those ruminant meats. Just do water and salt. Don't add the cheese and the butter and the cream and all the other things that you can do on a carnivore way of eating, because maybe those things are holding you back too. Because every time I've tried to reincorporate those things, it's either slowed my progress or caused of issues that were painful or uncomfortable. And I found that I do better on lion diet. But the bottom line is, I want to help people get healthy. I want to be a part of what you're doing. That's why I invested in Revero. I don't know if you even knew that, but I was one of your Kickstarter investors, because I believe in what you're doing. And I'm really thankful to be here, able to speak to some of the people that you're still trying to help even today.
Yeah. First of all, thanks for investing in Revero. And we are less than just like 2 weeks out from seeing our very first patient. So finally, after all the hard work, and it takes a lot of stuff to launch a nationwide digital health company. I'll just put it at that. But we're finally on the cusp of doing that. And we've got nearly 1,000 people signed up on the waiting list. So it's already, I think we're going to have a lot of success with that. So wonderful. A couple things. I'm just curious. You said you were part of a long-term care home, like a nursing home type facility. And how is it? Because you may be familiar with him. His name's Hal Kramer, and I interviewed him a while back, and he runs a nursing home facility. He runs 4 or 5 of them in Phoenix. And he's got all his, you might want to interview the guy. In fact, he's a great guy, but he's putting his patients on, he's putting us residents on carnivore ketogenic diets and getting them exercising. And as you might expect, a lot of them are not even needing nursing home anymore. Like they were left there to more or less almost die. It's like, no, here, you take them and we can't do anything with these people. A lot more of their dementia improve. He's seeing obviously the people are overweight reverse that. So I'm just wondering, was it because it was federally funded or something like that? They dictated the nutritional policy, or why were they so interested in what you fed them?
First of all, most of Well, really, all of the regulations that deal with managing, in my case, it was more like assisted living. We were technically a personal care home, but we did assisted living type things. But one of those ridiculous regulations that came along, because mostly assisted living homes and nursing homes are who pay into these regulating companies, they made sure the wording, if you're a personal care home, you cannot use the words assisted and living together in your title. So they're already infringing on my free speech ability to begin with, because we were definitely assisting people with their daily living. The only thing that kept us from being an assisted living home based on the standards early on was that we had, our halls were too narrow and our doorways were slightly too narrow. So that was why we weren't allowed to call ourselves assisted living, but we were definitely assisting people with the living. The state by state regulations are going to be different. And my experience in working in a Georgia home like this is that a couple of things happen. You've got different rules for personal care homes, you got different rules for assisted living homes, and you got different rules for nursing homes, and they're progressively more stringent. But the problem is these regulators deal with more of the second two than they do the first one. So they know those rules. They're right on the tip of their brain. They don't remember which ones don't apply to personal care homes. And a lot of times they would apply those more stringent rules to us. We wound up putting in a vent hood in our kitchen, for instance, when the place was built. That was 3 times more expensive than it needed to be, just because they said that it had to be this size or something like that, because they oftentimes will default to the most stringent requirement because they don't remember what the other requirement was, or maybe they just don't care. I don't know. I like to always assume that people aren't doing it for malicious reasons or for profit motive. Like maybe they're trying to help the installer make some money, but there is a cynical side of me that looks at it and says people are making money on all this regulatory requirements and licensing and a lot of things like that. The doctors would also come back and say, don't keep feeding them this, don't keep feeding them that, cut the salt out. And like we had signs up we had to put up because the regulations were you can't be adding salt to their food because you have people that are diabetic in there. And then also the doctors are telling the people constantly that it's okay to eat some cake once in a while. It's okay to have your pastas, eat the white meat chicken breast. And there was no convincing them, especially when I wasn't in good shape. I didn't have any ability to change anybody's mind because I didn't start losing weight until about 4 months before I stopped working in the retirement home industry. So I didn't have anything that could show them, hey, look, this is working for me. This could work for you. I was still overweight and unhappy. And of course, they're going to listen to their doctor over their layman retirement home administrator. But even afterward, and I would go back and talk to some of them, it was just, they would look and see the changes and they were impressed with it, but they were afraid to change. And it made it hard for me to make recommendations to older folks because I didn't want to be out here, especially on YouTube, telling people don't listen to your doctor, because obviously we run a risk of being thrown off of the channel because we're going against some guideline that YouTube wants to follow. And I want to be able to reach people. And I don't like having to censor, but unfortunately, that's the world we currently live in. And I'm hoping that's going to change too. But it was just fighting against the mentality. I found that people that lived in these homes, they trusted their doctors implicitly. They didn't do any research on their own very often. Very rarely did anybody look into what the medicines they were taking were. A lot of times their kids would, which was great. I was thankful to see family members who took a participation in their loved ones' care. But that didn't happen too often. And as there's a lot of mixed information out there. You'll have somebody trying to tell their parents that it's okay to eat the candies as long as they're doing an all vegetable diet or something like that. And they're just being led down the wrong path because over the past 40 years, we've been told breads, carbohydrates, meats at the top. Don't eat meat. Don't eat red meat, especially, which is all that I eat now. And I'm the healthiest I've been. I was down to 176 pounds back in January. And I hadn't been under 189 since my senior year of high school. Prior to that, I don't know when I was 189, but I was probably 13 years old when I was even 189. To be 50 years old and to be this healthy has been amazing. But even when I would go and see these people that I'd loved and cared for before, they still didn't want to listen to me. because I wasn't a doctor. I wasn't somebody that had any credentials. And they've been told, you've got to trust your doctor. You've got to trust the government. You've got to trust whoever's leading you down this path, because you can't do it yourself. But if there's anything I have learned, is that if you don't take control, your health is going to suffer.
Yeah, amen to that. That's for sure. You've got the most skin in the game on that. And if you blindly put your faith in whoever, government, doctor, healthcare system, and the results are what they are, you're like, look in the mirror and see what that trust has gotten you. And if it's gotten you something you don't want, then it's time to change that. And I'm fortunate that I went to school. I did all my medical credentialing, got my MD and my surgical residency, and spent many years practicing as a physician. And so that gives me a little more credibility. But honestly, the advice is still almost the same. I might have a little more nuance and some stuff about that, but it doesn't change much of what I recommend for people. Do you find that as you've gotten because you talk about your pro-freedom, which I think it's a great thing. I think all humans should seek to be as free as we can be to a reasonable degree. Do you find that now that you've discovered that maybe the nutritional advice that you've been given for 40, 50 years was basically wrong, or at least wrong for you, that you question other aspects of society in general? There's a lot of things people tell you this. I found particularly myself, I question a lot of things. I found out the very hard way that there is a lot of conflict of interest and honestly corruption within medicine. That was part of my experiences as a physician. And it jaded me pretty hard against that. And then you find out the nutrition stuff might be screwed up. And then you look at the entire pharmaceutical industry, how it's completely the regulatory capture that goes on at the FDA and to some degree the CDC. And it's very sad to see that. Do you, I know you don't want to, I know there's a line you have to walk, and you're right, there's censorship, which is in my mind abominable, quite honestly. But you can't actually openly talk about, I think, things that are important to talk about. But what have you found your just general, I don't know, belief system or has changed as you've gotten healthier? Because you've gotten healthier, clearly.
If it's changed, it's just been verified that the things that I suspected were wrong were definitely wrong. That's ultimately what the change would be. Because I learned very early on that the struggle for power leads to a lot of lies. And I've learned since then that even what I thought was going on is worse than than I thought it was, because we see the power struggle. We see what the WEF has been able to do since its inception in the 1970s and how much control it has now, how you've got all these multi-billionaires getting together, that many of them are pushing the climate change notion. And I don't know what I should and shouldn't say here, but I'm going to tell you what I think, unless you cut me off. The climate change stuff is being used to gain more power. The healthcare push, where the government is offering free things. First of all, the government doesn't have anything free to give you. Somebody's paying for it. Ultimately, that was about getting power over your body. The climate change thing is about getting power over your life. And then the other thing that they talk about is that they have this, this nihilistic view that other people are getting in the way of my life. So things that I can't directly verify, that I can't, like an investigator or as a prosecutor, go before the judge and say, look, here it all is. There's too many arrows pointing in the way that we're being lied to about a lot of things for either profit motive or power motive. And watching this go on over the past 40 years or 30 years, at least, that I've been paying close attention to it. Like I said, politics was something that I paid a lot of attention to, but I was either preaching to the choir or I was hearing crickets. So there was nobody to talk to about it. And I don't like to focus on it in my channel too much, because I want to focus on this. Is even with my struggles, I want to be able to talk about my struggles, but I like to stay positive and encourage people. You can do the good things for yourself. If you want to change the world, I can't do anything to Klaus Schwab. I can't do anything to what Bill Gates wants to do, because he claims to be this big philanthropist. But what I see is he's doing things that are just giving him more and more power and more control. They want us to eat bugs. They want us to eat computer processed plant garbage for protein. And I don't want any part of that stuff. I can't change that. But what I can change is people at the base level, and encourage them that they can fix the little things in their lives that are going to allow them to have the mental clarity to do what they need to do, to have the physical energy to do the things they would like to do, to have the body that they want to live in, that they can be an encouragement to their wife or their husband or their sons or their parents or their daughters. They can be an encouragement to those around them. And as every one of these little lights of people start to wake up to the health benefits of a carnivore way of eating or lion diet, or even keto in some cases. I'm not a big keto knowledgeable about keto, but I understand a lot of people start there. So I'm not going to dissuade anybody from doing anything that's going to help them take more control of their health, because as those little lights start to burn, and then they start to spread to their family and they start to spread to their friends. And now you hear about all these other people. So when I started doing this on YouTube, I had no idea there was a carnivore community out there. I didn't even know who you were, even though I went back and watched that video with Mikhaila, and I realized, oh, she mentioned Dr. Shawn Baker. I didn't know who Dr. Shawn Baker was back then. All I knew is when I started this, I just wanted to share what I knew was going to help me lose a little weight. And then that first video got hundreds of thousands of views. And I said, I guess I need to keep talking about this. And it's been a blessing to be able to help people, because even though I see all this power structure moving us in the wrong direction, it's not going to change by me down here. I'm still working a full-time job. I'm trying to manage my channel. I'm trying to pay for the bills for my family. I can't affect that people that are trying to run the world. I certainly can't affect the people that are trying to run this country, other than the occasional vote, and who knows how good that's going. I can't affect my household. I can be a positive effect on my boys. I can be a positive effect on my wife. And that is spread to friends of mine that I've known. It is spread to new people that I've met. It's spread to the community that I've built on YouTube and on Facebook and Twitter and everywhere else you can find me on. That's where I think we're going to win, is that we've got the numbers. There's a lot more people out there who are fed up with exactly what you're talking about when it comes to this top-down control, this authoritarian idea that they can make the world a better place ultimately for themselves by controlling everybody else. And we can break free from some of this nonsense that's been shoved down our throats, all this propaganda about food and medicine, and we can be free.
Yeah.
We can have the free. But real quick, you had mentioned there's a degree on freedom. I'm all for law and order. I am not a anarchist, although I can understand their position on those things. I still think we need to have law and order. But when you've got laws that are designed to prevent people from doing things rather than punish people for doing things, that's where we get the breakdown, because then it becomes like Minority Report. At some point, we're just searching for people who haven't even committed a crime yet to judge them for it. And then everybody's guilty of something. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that's okay. And I think I often preach this on my other channel when I talk about market demand is a powerful thing. But it takes, like you said, it takes lots of people, millions of people to say, hey, look, this is what we're going to do. And you either provide it for us or somebody else will. And I think that's ultimately where we have power as collectively as a group, and it shouldn't be underestimated. And like I said, I'll tell you what, Dante, we're low on time here. Let me just finish out with letting you just share where people can go to find you, because I'm sure you got, I can tell you're very passionate about this, and I'm sure people would like to continue to hear what you have to say. So where can they go?
The biggest place, because I've been on YouTube for 2.5 years talking about this, I'm at Ferrigno Freedom. That's the @ symbol, and then FERIGNO Freedom, all one word. And you can find my channel there. And I'm also on Rumble. I got on Rumble because I realized at some point with my positions on freedom, I may not always be on YouTube. So I like to let people know, get behind me on Rumble while you can, because that may be the only place you find me. I got on Locals. I haven't done a whole lot with that, but I'm there. I'm on Twitter at my first and last name, which is Dante, Dante Ferrigno, Ferigno. I'm on Facebook with a Facebook page and a Facebook group. The group is private so that people can come and share stories, and it's not going out to all of their friends and family who might ridicule them for doing a carnivore way of eating. That way the group can be us working together to share ideas, to share successes. And those are both at Ferrigno Freedom also. And then you can find me on Instagram at Ferrigno Freedom. And I think that's about it. But, and you can email me too. My email is in the description of every video I have, and it's on my YouTube page and my other pages as well. I love to hear from people. I'm finding I have a lot less time lately to address to those direct issues, but that's a good thing. That just means I'm reaching more people, and I'm honored and thankful to be a part of what is helping people get healthier and happier, and finally actually talking about something that is making a difference.
Awesome. Thank you, Dante. Appreciate it. Good luck. I'm sure we'll run into each other again at some point down the road. But anyway, for the rest of you guys, thanks for being here. I'll be back in tomorrow morning. Take care. Thanks, Dante. Bye-bye.
One of the things I do to fight back against big food and big pharma is to recommend companies that make animal-based products that are good for our bodies and good for our skin. In this case, I'm talking about Vintage Tradition. Vintage Tradition tallow balms are a go-to for me now, especially the unscented one. I like it because it doesn't have anything extra in it other than extra virgin olive oil and tallow rendered from suet. Highly saturated and therefore more therapeutic than any other. They don't use any trim fat or any other fats besides suet. So if you want some ancestrally appropriate skincare products that are going to help support the carnivore movement, head over to vintagetradition.com and use my discount code DANTE, D-A-N-T-E, to save 10% on your order. I promise you won't regret it. Their products are fantastic. I love them and I use them all the time.
If we pay extra, could we maybe get some grease or fat?